I never thought I'd be one of those guys who'd end up here, writing a story about their marriage crumbling before their eyes. But here I am, trying to make sense of it all. My name's Sam, and I've been married to Melissa for 10 years. We don't have kids, and up until recently I thought our life was pretty solid. I work a lot, but I always made sure to give her enough time, or at least I thought I did. Melissa's always been a bit, let's say, high maintenance. She's beautiful, no doubt about it. Long brown hair, green eyes that could either light up a room or freeze you on the spot depending on her mood. People often told me how lucky I was to have her, and for the longest time I believed them. Our sex life had been good too, or at least I assumed it was. I mean, she never complained, and we did it often enough for me to think everything was fine. We had a nice house, no financial problems, and we traveled when we could. On the surface, everything seemed perfect, but now that I think back, I realize there were signs, subtle things that I didn't pick up on at the time. It started with her spending more time out with her friends. She would tell me about these girls' nights or shopping trips that seemed to happen more often. And then, there were the phone calls she'd take in the other room, which she brushed off as her mom or sister needing advice. I didn't think much of it. I trusted her completely. Why wouldn't I? She was my wife. But then, I started noticing other things. Her phone was glued to her hand, and she was more secretive about it. She'd laugh at texts and quickly close the screen if I happened to glance over. If I asked her who it was, she'd get defensive, accusing me of being paranoid or controlling. A few months ago, I started working late more often. We had a big project at the office, and I needed to pull longer hours. Melissa didn't seem to mind. In fact, she encouraged it. "Make that money, baby," she'd say with a wink. I didn't realize at the time, but that was probably her way of getting me out of the house. I should have seen it. I should have known something was off, but I didn't. The first real hint came when a friend of mine, Mark, pulled me aside one night. We were at a BBQ with a few neighbors, and he had this strange look on his face. "Sam, can I talk to you for a second?" he said, his voice low. "Sure, what's up?" I asked, curious but not worried. He hesitated, looking like he didn't want to be the bearer of bad news. "I've seen Melissa, with some guys." I laughed it off at first. "You mean her friends? She's got a lot of guy friends. It's no big deal." "No, man, it's not like that," Mark said, more serious now. "I've seen her with a group of them. It wasn't just friendly, they were close." I didn't know how to react. I wanted to punch him for even suggesting something like that, but a part of me knew he wouldn't lie about something this serious. Still, I shook it off. Melissa wouldn't do that. Not my wife. But the doubt had been planted. I tried to ignore it, but the signs were all there. She'd come home late, smelling like she'd been drinking, her clothes disheveled. I'd ask her where she was, and she'd throw out some excuse about staying out with her friends. Sometimes she wouldn't even bother with an explanation, just roll her eyes and go to bed. I told myself I was overthinking it. Maybe I was just stressed from work, but the nagging feeling wouldn't go away. A week ago, I decided to check her phone. I hated myself for it, but I had to know. Of course, it was locked. When I asked her about it, she went off on me, calling me insecure and accusing me of not trusting her. We had a huge fight, and I ended up sleeping on the couch that night. Things have been tense since then. I can't shake the feeling that something's going on, but without proof, I don't know what to do. I'm hoping I'm wrong. I'm hoping this is just a rough patch, that we can work through whatever this is. But deep down, I'm terrified that I already know the truth. After that fight about her phone, things got worse. Melissa became distant, colder than usual. There were no more attempts at conversation, no effort to patch things up. She didn't even seem to care that we were drifting apart. It was like she was already halfway out the door. But I kept telling myself that I was overreacting, that I had no proof. I didn't want to be that guy, the paranoid husband accusing his wife of things she wasn't doing. I mean, trust is the foundation of any marriage, right? At least that's what I kept telling myself. But it was getting harder to believe my own lies. That nagging feeling wouldn't go away. Then, last Thursday, it happened. It was late. I had come home from another long day at work, exhausted. The house was quiet, too quiet. Melissa's car was in the driveway, so I knew she was home, but there were no lights on downstairs. I called out to her, but there was no response. I walked up the stairs, heading toward our bedroom, and as I got closer, I could hear something. At first, I thought it was the TV, but then I realized it wasn't. The sounds were unmistakable. My heart stopped. I stood frozen outside the door, listening to the moans, the gasps, the unmistakable rhythm of bodies moving together. My hand trembled as I reached for the doorknob, every instinct telling me to stop, to turn around, to run. But I couldn't. I had to see. I opened the door slowly, praying that I was wrong, that my mind was playing tricks on me. But there they were. 3 men, 3 fucking men, on my bed, with my wife in the middle of it all. She didn't even notice me at first, too busy screaming out in pleasure. The image burned itself into my brain, her head thrown back, her body writhing, tangled between these strangers like some cheap porn scene. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I stood there, watching, feeling like my entire world was collapsing around me. I wanted to shout, to rip those men off her and beat them senseless. But I couldn't move. And then Melissa saw me. "Sam!" she screamed, scrambling to cover herself with a sheet, her face twisted in shock. No, not shock, annoyance. "What the hell are you doing?" she yelled, as if I were the one in the wrong, as if I had just walked in on some innocent misunderstanding. The men, to their credit, jumped off the bed looking just as startled. But Melissa, she was furious. I couldn't even form words. I just stood there, shaking with a rage I had never felt before. "Get the hell out of here," she screeched, her voice reaching that hysterical pitch that always made me feel small, like I was the idiot in every situation. "This isn't what it looks like," she continued, throwing out the most cliched line in the book. I stared at her, dumbfounded. "What do you mean, it's not what it looks like? You're having sex with 3 men in our bed, Melissa." She rolled her eyes, still clutching the sheet around her, looking more annoyed than ashamed. "Oh, come on, Sam. It's not a big deal. You're overreacting." "Overreacting?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You're cheating on me, with 3 guys at the same time, and you think I'm overreacting?" One of the men, some tall guy with tattoos all over his arms, tried to speak up. "Dude, we didn't know." "Shut the fuck up," I snapped, cutting him off. He wisely backed down, grabbing his clothes off the floor. Melissa started laughing. "God, you're so pathetic," she spat. "Always playing the victim. Maybe if you weren't such a boring piece of shit, I wouldn't have to find excitement elsewhere." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. All those nights she'd been late, all those times she'd brushed me off, it all started to make sense. This wasn't a one-time thing. It had been going on for God knows how long, right under my nose. "You're a disgusting bitch," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. I had never spoken to her like that before, but in that moment I didn't care. Her eyes narrowed and she let out a bitter laugh. "Yeah? Well, you're a loser, Sam. You always have been. That's why I needed real men to satisfy me." I couldn't take it anymore. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving her there with her lovers, her insults echoing in my head. I grabbed my keys and left the house, my mind spinning, my heart shattered. I drove around aimlessly for hours, not knowing what to do or where to go. I wanted to scream, to hit something, but all I could do was sit in my car and stare at the dashboard, numb. When I finally got home, she was gone, along with the 3 guys. The house was eerily quiet, but our bed was still a mess. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow. The next morning, I woke up on the couch, though I hadn't really slept. My mind was still replaying what I saw, what I heard the night before. I couldn't shake it, couldn't get those images out of my head. The smell of her perfume was still lingering in the air, mixing with the foul memory of everything that had happened. Melissa wasn't home. She must have left with those guys after I stormed out. There was no text from her, no call, nothing. Not that I expected one. She clearly didn't give a damn about what she did or what it meant for us. I sat up, the heaviness in my chest making it hard to breathe. My eyes stung from lack of sleep. My whole body felt like it was weighed down with lead, and my mind. God, I couldn't think straight. I needed to do something. I needed to act before this ate me alive. First thing I did was call a lawyer. I had no idea what to expect, but I knew I couldn't just sit around and let her walk all over me. Divorce was the only option now. There was no coming back from this, no fixing what she'd done. Even if I wanted to, which I didn't, her betrayal was just too deep. The lawyer was calm, professional. "You're making the right decision," she said after I explained the situation. I told her everything, sparing no detail. How I found Melissa with those 3 guys, her attitude, her insults, the sheer audacity of her. The lawyer didn't seem shocked, which made me wonder how many stories like mine she must have heard before. She explained the next steps, the paperwork, the legal process. All the while I sat there in a daze, nodding along but barely registering what she was saying. I did catch the part about property and assets, though. Since Melissa and I didn't have kids, things would be straightforward. The house would have to be dealt with, but other than that, it sounded like a clean break was possible. By the time I hung up, I felt slightly better. Not by much, but at least I had a plan. At least I was doing something. Then, right on cue, Melissa waltzed back in like nothing had happened. It was around noon when she finally decided to show up. I heard the door open, followed by the click of her heels as she casually walked into the living room, tossing her purse onto the couch like it was any other day. Like she hadn't just shattered our marriage less than 12 hours ago. I stood up, my fists clenched at my sides. I wasn't sure what I expected her to say, but I sure as hell wasn't prepared for what came out of her mouth. "You're seriously mad?" she scoffed, raising an eyebrow like I was the one being unreasonable. "Jesus, Sam, get over it. It's not like I killed someone." I could feel the blood rushing to my head, my pulse pounding in my ears. "You cheated on me, Melissa, with 3 men in our bed." She rolled her eyes, walking past me like it was no big deal. "Yeah, so? It's not the end of the world." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Not the end of the world? You destroyed our marriage. You think this is just something I can shrug off like it didn't happen?" She flopped down onto the couch, crossing her legs and giving me that look, the one she always used when she was about to twist things in her favor. "Maybe if you weren't so boring, I wouldn't have to find excitement elsewhere." "Boring?" I repeated, my voice rising. "I worked my ass off to provide for us. I gave you everything you wanted." "Exactly," she said, her tone sharp. "You worked, all the time. And when you weren't working, you were complaining about how tired you were. You stopped trying, Sam. You gave up on me." That hit me like a punch to the gut. I stood there speechless as she continued to blame me for her cheating, like somehow I had pushed her into the arms of those men. I couldn't take it anymore. "I'm done," I said, my voice cold. "I've already contacted a lawyer. I'm filing for divorce." Melissa blinked, her expression changing ever so slightly. For the first time, I saw something close to concern flash across her face, but just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by that same smug smile. "Fine, do whatever you want." She got up from the couch, brushing past me like I didn't matter. I followed her into the hallway, watching as she grabbed her coat and purse. She looked over her shoulder at me, her eyes glinting with something dark and twisted. "You know, Sam," she said with a laugh, "maybe this is for the best. You're not man enough for me anyway." And with that, she walked out, slamming the door behind her. I stood there, staring at the closed door, her words echoing in my head. Not man enough? I had loved her, trusted her, built my life around her, and this was how she repaid me? By shattering everything and walking away like I was nothing? I wasn't going to let her break me. Not anymore. Later that night, I started packing her things. Every piece of clothing, every little trinket she left behind, all of it went into boxes. I didn't care where she went or what she did next. As far as I was concerned, Melissa was out of my life for good. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. She wasn't going to let me walk away that easily. And something told me she had more tricks up her sleeve. After Melissa walked out that day, I thought I'd finally hit rock bottom. But as I quickly found out, things could always get worse. I spent the next few days packing up her things, trying to focus on the practical steps, calling the lawyer again, starting the paperwork for the divorce, blocking her on social media. Anything to distract myself from the emotional hell I was stuck in. I hadn't heard from her since she left, and part of me hoped I never would again. I kept thinking that if I could just push her out of my life completely, maybe I'd start to feel like myself again. But Melissa wasn't the type to just disappear. It started with phone calls. I'd hear my phone buzzing in the middle of the night, and when I'd look, it was her. She never left a message. Sometimes she'd call 4 or 5 times in a row, and then nothing for hours. It was like she wanted to keep me on edge, knowing I wasn't ready to deal with her. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, hearing the ring in my head even when it wasn't happening. I ignored every single one. But then the texts started. At first, they were just weird. Short, cryptic messages like, "We need to talk," or "You don't know everything," followed by radio silence for hours. It wasn't until one morning around 2 a.m. when I got a picture that made my blood run cold. It was her, lying in bed with one of those guys from the night I caught them. She was smiling, half naked, with her head resting on his chest like she was proud of herself, like she was flaunting it. My stomach turned, and I had to set my phone down before I threw it across the room. What the hell is wrong with her? I deleted the picture, trying not to think about it, but the damage was done. I could feel the rage bubbling inside me, and all the progress I thought I'd made in cutting her out started to slip away. I wasn't even sure what she wanted. Was she trying to rub it in my face? Make me jealous? Was this her idea of a sick joke? The worst part was that I didn't even reply. I couldn't bring myself to engage with her, knowing it would only make things worse. So I blocked her number too. I thought that might be the end of it. I figured she'd get bored eventually and move on to her next victim. But, of course, I underestimated how far she'd go. 3 days after blocking her, I came home from work and found the front door unlocked. My heart jumped into my throat. I knew I had locked it that morning. I always lock it. I pushed the door open cautiously, stepping inside, and that's when I saw it. Melissa was sitting on the couch, legs crossed, holding a glass of wine like she owned the place. "What the hell are you doing here?" I demanded, my voice cracking with anger and shock. She smiled, that infuriating, smug smile that I had come to hate. "What? I can't visit my own house?" "Your own house?" I shot back. "This isn't your house anymore, Melissa. Get the hell out." She stood up, swaying slightly, clearly tipsy. "Oh, Sam, don't be so dramatic. We're still married, aren't we? And technically, half of this place is mine until the divorce goes through." She took a step toward me, the smell of alcohol strong on her breath. I clenched my fists, trying to keep my temper in check. "I don't care. You can't just show up here whenever you feel like it. Get out before I call the cops." Her eyes flashed, and suddenly her whole demeanor shifted. "Call the cops? You're really going to kick me out of my own home, you piece of shit? After everything I've put up with from you?" I could feel my blood boiling. "What you've put up with? You're the one who cheated, Melissa. You're the one who destroyed everything." "Oh, please," she spat, rolling her eyes. "Don't act like you're some innocent victim. You were never home, Sam. You never paid attention to me. What was I supposed to do? Just sit around and wait for you to finally care?" Her words hit me hard, even though I knew they were just more of her manipulative bullshit. She was twisting everything, trying to rewrite history and make it seem like I was the one at fault. I wasn't falling for it this time. "Get out," I said through gritted teeth. She stared at me for a moment, her expression hardening. "Fine," she finally said, setting the wine glass down on the coffee table with a loud clink. "But don't think for a second this is over." I watched as she grabbed her purse and stormed toward the door, slamming it behind her with so much force that the windows rattled. My hands were shaking, my head spinning with anger and disbelief. I couldn't believe she had the nerve to break into my house, act like nothing was wrong, and then try to make me the bad guy. I paced around the living room, trying to calm myself down. My lawyer had warned me that Melissa might try to pull some stunts during the divorce process, but this was insane. I couldn't let her keep doing this to me. The next day, I changed the locks. I wasn't taking any more chances. But something told me that Melissa wasn't done. Not by a long shot. There was this feeling in the pit of my stomach that she was planning something bigger, something worse. And as much as I wanted to believe that things couldn't get any worse, I had a sinking suspicion that the real storm was yet to come. Changing the locks should have given me some peace of mind, but instead, it only seemed to fuel Melissa's fire. I figured blocking her number and cutting her out would stop the madness, but the opposite happened. It was like she thrived on the chaos she was creating, and now that she couldn't just waltz into my house anymore, she had to find another way to get under my skin. A couple of days passed, and for a brief moment, I thought maybe things were finally calming down. Maybe she'd found someone else to torment. I should have known better. On Thursday morning, I was heading to work, walking out to my car when I noticed something strange. My tires. They were completely flat. All 4 of them. I stood there, staring at the car, trying to wrap my head around what I was seeing. There were no nails, no glass, nothing to explain the flats, except for the slashes in the sidewalls. Melissa. I knew it had to be her. Who else would do something like this? My stomach churned with rage as I pulled out my phone, ready to call the cops, but then I stopped. What would that accomplish? She'd deny it, claim she wasn't involved, and I'd have no proof. Instead, I called a tow truck and got the tires replaced. It was an expense I didn't need, but I was determined not to let her win. I was done playing her games. But even as I tried to focus on work that day, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. The slashed tires were just the beginning. I got home later than usual that night, hoping to find some quiet. But the second I opened the front door, I was hit with a stench so awful it nearly knocked me over. I froze, my heart pounding as I realized the smell was coming from inside the house. I walked through the hallway, following the smell toward the living room. My stomach dropped when I saw it. Garbage, piles of it, scattered across the floor. Bags of rotting food, broken glass, beer cans, and old takeout containers. And right in the middle of it all, spray painted across my wall in giant red letters, were the words, "You deserve this." My legs nearly gave out beneath me. I felt sick, my body shaking with a mixture of disgust and fury. Melissa had been here. She had broken in again, trashed my house, and left this disgusting display for me to come home to. I stood there breathing heavily, trying to keep my anger in check, but I couldn't hold it in any longer. I lost it. I kicked the pile of garbage, sending cans and bottles flying across the room. I screamed, cursing her name, knowing full well that she was out there somewhere, probably laughing at me, probably watching the whole thing unfold like it was some twisted game. I grabbed my phone and called the cops this time. Enough was enough. I wasn't going to let her destroy my life any further. When the officer showed up, he took one look at the mess and whistled. "Looks like someone's pretty pissed off," he muttered, scribbling notes. "Yeah, well, that someone's my soon-to-be ex-wife," I growled, pacing around the living room. "She's been harassing me for weeks." He asked me if I had any evidence that it was Melissa, but of course I didn't. She was too smart for that. There were no security cameras, something I deeply regretted now, and no neighbors who had seen anything. Without proof, the cop shrugged, saying he couldn't do much except file a report. It wasn't enough. After the officer left, I collapsed on the couch, staring at the wreckage of what used to be my living room. How had it come to this? How had the woman I'd once loved so deeply turned into this monster who was hell-bent on ruining me? I spent the entire night cleaning up the mess, scrubbing the walls and bagging the trash. By the time I was done, it was nearly 3 a.m., and I was exhausted, physically and mentally. But I knew I couldn't just sit back and wait for her next move. I needed to be prepared. The next morning, I bought security cameras and installed them around the house. Front door, back door, driveway, every angle was covered. If she tried something again, I'd have the proof I needed to take her down. But even though I was bracing for the worst, nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. It was the following weekend when I got a call from my lawyer. I thought she was calling to give me an update on the divorce proceedings, but her voice was serious, more serious than usual. "Sam, we need to talk," she said. "Melissa, she's filed a restraining order against you." I nearly dropped the phone. "What? A restraining order? Against me?" My lawyer sighed. "She's claiming that you've been harassing her, showing up at her place unannounced, threatening her." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Melissa, the woman who had broken into my house, trashed my place, and slashed my tires, was now trying to paint me as the aggressor. It was insane. "Don't worry," my lawyer said quickly. "We'll fight it. But you need to be careful. She's playing dirty and you need to make sure you don't give her anything to use against you." I sat down, my head spinning. I couldn't believe this was happening. Melissa was taking this war to a whole new level, trying to turn the legal system against me. It was like I was trapped in some nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. But I wasn't going to let her win. Not this time. I hung up the phone and sat in silence for a long time, my mind racing. Melissa thought she could destroy me, that she could twist things in her favor and make me out to be the bad guy. But if she wanted a fight, she was going to get one. I was done being the victim. I was ready to fight back. I couldn't believe it. Melissa, the woman who had cheated on me, wrecked my house and sabotaged my life, had the audacity to file a restraining order against me. It felt like I was living in some twisted, upside-down version of reality. But the worst part? She was playing the game well. Too well. I had no choice but to meet with my lawyer again. The restraining order, even though it was bogus, put me in a dangerous position. Any wrong move, anything that could be interpreted as me harassing or threatening her, could land me in serious trouble. "She's smart," my lawyer said, pacing back and forth across her office. "She knows the system and she's trying to manipulate it. But we'll fight this. You haven't done anything wrong." I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my temples. I haven't even talked to her since she trashed my house. She's the one who's been stalking me, not the other way around. "I know," my lawyer replied, "but Melissa's trying to set you up. It's classic manipulation. She's creating a narrative where she's the victim and you're the villain. The courts take these accusations seriously, even if they're false." It felt like I was drowning in a sea of lies and deceit, and Melissa was the one throwing the waves. Everywhere I turned, there she was, twisting the truth, manipulating people, and turning my world upside down. I had no idea what her endgame was, but I wasn't going to let her win. The next few days were a blur of legal paperwork and meetings with my lawyer. We gathered everything we could: witness statements, text messages, photos of the damage she'd done to my house, anything that could prove my innocence and expose her lies. I was angry, more angry than I had ever been in my life, but I knew I had to stay calm. If I lost my temper, it would only give her more ammunition to use against me. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get worse, they did. One evening, I was at home, trying to unwind after another long day of dealing with the divorce and the restraining order, when I got a text. At first I thought it was a spam message, but when I opened it, my blood ran cold. It was a video of me. The clip showed me leaving my house, slamming the door behind me and getting into my car. The timestamp on the video was from a few days ago, right after I had found my tires slashed. The angle was low, like someone had hidden a camera somewhere near my driveway. I felt sick to my stomach. I hadn't installed my own security cameras until after that, so I knew this wasn't from my system. Someone had been watching me. She had been watching me. A second message popped up. "You can't hide from me." Melissa. My hand shook as I stared at the screen. She had been filming me, tracking my every move, and now she was using that footage to taunt me. I felt exposed, violated, like there was nowhere I could go to escape her grasp. I forwarded the video to my lawyer immediately. "This is getting out of hand," I texted her. "She's stalking me. She's setting me up." The response was quick. "We'll use this. Stay calm." Stay calm? How could I stay calm when my own ex-wife was practically hunting me down? It wasn't just about the divorce anymore. It was about control. She wanted to break me, to make me feel powerless. And for the first time, I had to admit it was working. That night, I barely slept. Every sound outside made me jump. I kept thinking about the video, wondering where she had hidden the camera, wondering how many other times she had been watching me without my knowledge. It felt like she was always one step ahead, always finding new ways to mess with my mind. The next morning, I checked the security cameras I had installed. I scrolled through the footage from the last few days, hoping to catch something, anything that could prove she had been lurking around my property. But there was nothing, not a single frame of her. She was too smart for that. I realized then that this wasn't just about revenge for Melissa. This was about control. She wanted to push me over the edge, make me lose my mind, and then sit back and watch as everything fell apart. And then, just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, she made her next move. I was sitting at work trying to focus on anything but the mess that had become my life, when my phone buzzed. It was an email from Melissa. Subject: a little surprise. I opened it, my heart racing. Inside was another video, this one even worse than the last. It showed Melissa standing in front of our house, my house, smiling at the camera. "Hey Sam," she said, her voice sickeningly sweet. "I just thought I'd drop by to remind you that you're not safe. No matter what you do, I'll always be one step ahead." She walked up to the front door, jiggling the handle before looking back at the camera with a grin. "Oops, looks like you changed the locks. Too bad that won't stop me." She winked, then turned and walked away, laughing. I slammed my phone down on my desk, my heart pounding in my chest. How the hell was she getting away with this? She was taunting me, daring me to react, daring me to lose control. But this time, I wasn't going to give her what she wanted. I immediately forwarded the email to my lawyer explaining what had happened. This was it. This was the proof I needed to show the courts that Melissa was the one harassing me, stalking me. She wasn't some innocent victim. She was a dangerous, manipulative woman who was trying to ruin my life. Later that day, my lawyer called. "This is good, Sam. We can use this. I'll file an emergency motion with the court." It wasn't much, but it was a small victory in a long, exhausting war. Melissa thought she could break me, thought she could turn my life into a living nightmare. But she was wrong. I was done playing defense. It was time to go on the offensive. The next few days felt like a waiting game. After forwarding the video to my lawyer, I finally had something solid, something to fight back with. Melissa had slipped up. She was too confident, too cocky. That video of her at my house was proof that she was the one harassing me. My lawyer filed the emergency motion, and now all I had to do was wait for the court to take action. But waiting gave me too much time to think, and thinking led to rage. The more I replayed everything in my head, her cheating, the restraining order, the vandalism, and now her taunting video, the more I felt this seething anger bubbling under the surface. Melissa wasn't just out to ruin my life. She wanted to break me, to make sure I was left with nothing, while she waltzed away without a scratch. I wasn't going to let that happen. On Friday morning, my lawyer called with some good news. "The judge granted a hearing for next week," she said. "We'll present the video and your side of the story. This is our chance to turn things around, Sam." Hearing that should have been a relief, but instead, it felt like the calm before the storm. A week was a long time to wait, and knowing Melissa, she wasn't going to sit quietly in the background. I braced myself for whatever she might try next. Sure enough, by Saturday, she made her next move. It started with a phone call, a blocked number. I stared at my phone, knowing it was probably her, but against my better judgment, I answered. "Sam," her voice purred through the speaker. "I heard you've been busy with your little lawyer. You really think you can win this, don't you?" I gripped the phone tighter, trying to stay calm. "You need to stop this, Melissa. You've crossed the line. There's no coming back from this." She laughed, that high-pitched, mocking laugh that made my skin crawl. "Oh, sweetie, I haven't even started yet. You think a little video is going to save you? Please." I clenched my jaw, fighting the urge to yell. "Leave me alone, Melissa, I'm warning you." "Warn me?" she hissed, her tone suddenly sharp. "You have no idea what I'm capable of. You're going to regret ever crossing me, Sam. Just wait. By the time I'm done, you won't have anything left. Not your house, not your job, not even your reputation." The call ended abruptly, leaving me standing there, seething. Her words echoed in my head, and for a moment I felt that familiar wave of helplessness wash over me. But then something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to let her destroy me. I spent the rest of the weekend preparing for the court hearing, going over every piece of evidence, every detail that could help my case. My lawyer assured me that we had a strong chance of flipping the restraining order on Melissa. If we could prove she was the one harassing me, she'd be the one facing consequences. But Melissa wasn't about to go down without a fight. Monday morning, I walked out to my car to head to work, and that's when I saw it. Spray painted across the hood, in bold red letters, were the words, "Liar." It was like a punch to the gut. My hands started shaking as I stood there staring at the vandalism. This wasn't just about scaring me anymore. Melissa was escalating. She was trying to destroy everything I had left, piece by piece. I took pictures of the car and sent them to my lawyer. This was more evidence, more proof that she was out of control. But even as I documented everything, I couldn't shake the feeling that things were spiraling. By the time I got to work, my boss was waiting for me in the office. "Sam, we need to talk," he said, his expression serious. I followed him into the conference room, already dreading what was coming next. "Look, I don't know how to say this, but we've been getting some calls," he started, shifting uncomfortably. "About you. Personal stuff. Your wife. It's causing some concerns." I felt my stomach drop. "What kind of calls?" He sighed, rubbing his temples. "She's been calling the office, Sam, multiple times, telling people that you're abusive, that you're harassing her, even threatening her. I don't know what's going on, but HR is involved now." I could feel the blood draining from my face. This was exactly what Melissa had threatened, going after my job, my reputation. And now, it was happening. "She's lying," I said, my voice shaking. "She's been stalking me, vandalizing my house, everything. I have proof." My boss looked at me sympathetically, but his expression was tense. "I believe you, Sam, but this is becoming a serious issue. We're going to have to investigate, and until then, I'm afraid we have to suspend you." My heart sank. "Suspend me? You can't be serious." "I'm sorry," he said, genuinely looking uncomfortable. "But until we figure this out, we can't have this kind of distraction in the workplace." I felt like my entire world was crashing down around me. First my marriage, then my home, and now my job. Melissa was winning, just like she said she would. As I walked out of the office that day, my mind was a whirlwind of anger and desperation. How had it come to this? How had Melissa managed to dismantle my life so completely? But as I got into my car, staring at the vandalism on the hood, I realized something. She hadn't won yet. This was her final push. She was throwing everything at me, trying to break me before the court hearing. But if I stayed calm, if I kept my focus, I still had a chance to turn things around. I still had the video. I still had the truth. And I wasn't going down without a fight. The day of the court hearing came quicker than I expected. I had spent every minute preparing, gathering evidence, going over my story, and trying to keep my emotions in check. But despite everything, I couldn't shake the nerves. This wasn't just about getting the restraining order lifted. This was about proving that Melissa was the one who had been tormenting me. If I didn't win today, she'd continue to destroy my life piece by piece. I arrived at the courthouse early, trying to mentally brace myself for what was coming. My lawyer met me there, a calm and reassuring presence. She had been a rock throughout this whole ordeal, and I was thankful to have her on my side. But all the preparation in the world couldn't have prepared me for the moment Melissa walked in. She looked different than I had expected, polished, put together, and wearing this fake air of innocence that made my stomach churn. Gone was the venomous, sneering woman who had laughed in my face and spray-painted liar on my car. In her place stood someone who looked like the perfect victim. Her eyes met mine briefly, and she gave me this small, cold smile as if to say, "You have no idea what's coming." I clenched my fists, reminding myself to stay calm. This was all part of her plan, to make me lose control, to make me look like the aggressor. But I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. We were called into the courtroom, and as soon as we sat down, Melissa's lawyer began spinning the story. According to her, I was an obsessive, controlling husband who had been harassing and threatening Melissa ever since she left me. He painted me as some kind of stalker who refused to let go, someone who couldn't accept that the marriage was over. Every lie Melissa had told him, he recited as if it were gospel. My blood boiled as I listened, but I bit my tongue. My time would come. When it was finally our turn, my lawyer stood up and calmly began dismantling their story, piece by piece. She presented the video of Melissa taunting me outside my house, walking up to the door and saying, "You can't hide from me." She showed the pictures of the vandalism, the threatening texts, the slashed tires. And then, the final blow, the video of Melissa breaking into the house after I had changed the locks. Melissa's face remained neutral through it all, but I could see her lawyer starting to sweat. The judge, however, didn't react much. He was a stone-faced figure, just listening, taking it all in. But I could tell he was interested in the video. That was my hope. The irrefutable evidence. When it was Melissa's turn to speak, she turned on the waterworks. "I was scared," she said, her voice cracking as she looked at the judge, then at me. "Sam has always had a temper, and after I left I knew he wouldn't let me go easily. I didn't know what to do. I never wanted things to get this bad." She sniffled, wiping away fake tears with a tissue, playing her part perfectly. I could feel my anger rising, but I stayed silent. My lawyer had warned me that this might happen, that Melissa would play the victim to try to sway the judge's sympathy. But we had the facts on our side, the videos, the texts, the pictures, they were all undeniable. When the judge finally spoke, his voice was measured, calm. "After reviewing the evidence," he began, looking directly at me, "it's clear that both parties have contributed to the escalation of this situation." My heart skipped a beat. What did he mean by both parties? I hadn't done anything wrong. "However," he continued, turning his attention to Melissa, "the video evidence provided shows a clear pattern of harassment and intimidation by Mrs. Simmons. The restraining order against Mr. Simmons is hereby lifted, and I will be issuing a restraining order against Mrs. Simmons effective immediately." I exhaled a breath I didn't even realize I'd been holding. Melissa's face dropped. The fake tears were gone, replaced by cold fury. She didn't say a word, but I could see the hatred in her eyes as the judge spoke. She wasn't used to losing. After the hearing ended, Melissa stormed out of the courtroom without so much as a glance in my direction. Her lawyer followed quickly behind her, clearly defeated. I stood there for a moment, letting it all sink in. I had won. Finally, after everything she had put me through, the court saw her for what she really was, a manipulative, vindictive liar. The restraining order was gone, and she was the one being forced to stay away from me now. But as much as I wanted to feel victorious, there was still a nagging feeling in the back of my mind. I knew Melissa wasn't the type to give up easily. She wouldn't just disappear quietly into the background. She'd find another way to come after me. That much was certain. Outside the courthouse, my lawyer congratulated me on the win. "This is a huge step, Sam," she said. "But I'm going to be honest with you. You need to stay vigilant. She's not going to stop just because the law says she has to." I nodded, knowing she was right. Melissa was unpredictable, and if this whole nightmare had taught me anything, it was that I needed to stay one step ahead. As I drove home that afternoon, I tried to let myself relax, if only for a moment. I had won the battle, but I knew the war wasn't over. Sure enough, when I got home, there was a note stuck to my front door. It was simple, but the message was clear. This isn't over. I stared at the note for a long time, the words burning into my brain. Melissa was still out there, still plotting, still trying to destroy me. But this time I was ready. The note on my front door haunted me for days. This isn't over. Melissa had made it clear that she wasn't going to back down, even after losing in court. But what more could she do? The restraining order was in place, and I had enough evidence to bury her if she tried anything else. Still, the fear of what she might do next lingered. It wasn't just fear, though. It was exhaustion. I was tired of living in this constant state of anxiety, of waiting for her next move. I couldn't live like this anymore. Something had to give. The next week passed quietly. Too quietly. Melissa didn't show up at my house, didn't call or text. There were no more notes, no new vandalism, nothing. It was eerie, like the calm before the storm. My lawyer advised me to stay alert, but even she seemed cautiously optimistic that Melissa might finally be letting go. I wasn't so sure. Then one night I got a call that shattered the silence. It was Mark, a mutual friend of ours who had been trying to stay neutral throughout the whole ordeal. "Sam, man, you need to come to the bar," he said, his voice low and urgent. "What's going on?" I asked, my heart pounding. "It's Melissa. She's here, and she's talking to everyone about you." I froze. "What is she saying?" "Crazy shit, man. Telling everyone that you're abusive, that you tried to kill her, that the only reason she lost in court is because you faked all the evidence." My blood boiled. Melissa was trying to destroy my reputation in the only place she had left, among our friends. I had tried to take the high road to stay quiet and not involve anyone else, but she was dragging me through the mud in front of everyone who knew us. "I'll be right there," I said, hanging up. I drove to the bar, my mind racing. I knew confronting her in public wasn't a good idea, but I couldn't let her keep spreading lies about me. Not anymore. She'd already ruined so much of my life, but I wasn't going to let her take my friends too. When I walked into the bar, I spotted her immediately. She was sitting with a group of people, some friends, some strangers, holding court like she was the queen of the place. Her voice carried across the room, loud and confident, spinning her web of lies. "He's been stalking me," she was saying, her voice dripping with fake emotion. "I'm scared for my life, but the court system is so messed up that they're protecting him instead of me." I clenched my fists, trying to keep my anger in check as I approached the table. "Melissa!" Her eyes snapped up to meet mine, and for a split second I saw something flicker in her expression. Maybe fear, maybe surprise. But then it was gone, replaced by that smug smile I had come to despise. "Sam," she purred, tilting her head to the side. "What are you doing here? Come to defend your lies?" I looked around the table. Some of the people were watching us with wide eyes. Others were avoiding eye contact, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. I had to be careful. One wrong move, one outburst, and I'd play right into her hands. "I'm here to set the record straight," I said, my voice calm but firm. "Melissa, you need to stop. You've lost. You lost in court, and you're going to lose here too." She laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "Lost? Oh, sweetie, I haven't even started yet. You think some court ruling is going to stop me? I'll make sure everyone knows who you really are. You'll lose everything." I took a deep breath, fighting to stay calm. "Everyone here knows the truth, Melissa. They know what you did and they know who you are. The only person you're fooling is yourself." I turned to leave, but Melissa wasn't done. "You think you can walk away from this?" she shouted after me. "You think you're safe? You'll never be safe from me, Sam. I'll make sure of it." Her voice echoed through the bar, but I kept walking. I was done engaging with her, done feeding into her drama. She could scream all she wanted, but the truth was out there, and no amount of lies could change that. I got in my car, my hands shaking with the adrenaline of the encounter. I felt like I had finally put her in her place, but I knew it wouldn't end here. Melissa wasn't the type to give up, and she certainly wasn't going to let me walk away without one final blow. That final blow came sooner than I expected. The next morning, I woke up to a barrage of messages on my phone. Friends, acquaintances, even coworkers, all of them sending me screenshots of a social media post Melissa had made. She had taken our private life, our divorce, everything, and blasted it across the internet for the world to see. Her post was long and dramatic, full of lies about how I had abused her, stalked her, manipulated the court system. She painted herself as the ultimate victim, and me as the monster. The comments were full of support for her, from people who had no idea what the real story was. It was humiliating. But then I saw the final part of her post and everything changed. She had attached a photo of herself with bruises, fake bruises, claiming that I had attacked her after the court hearing. The rage I felt was like nothing I had ever experienced. This wasn't just her trying to hurt me anymore. This was her trying to destroy me completely, to ruin my life, my career, everything I had left. But this time, she had gone too far. I called my lawyer immediately, sending her the post and the photos. "This is it," she said, her voice cold and determined. "We're going to sue her for defamation. She's not getting away with this." The lawsuit was filed within days, and the legal process began to take its course. Melissa, ever the manipulator, tried to backtrack, claiming she hadn't meant any harm, that she was just expressing her feelings. But the damage was done, and this time, she was the one who couldn't escape the consequences. The court ruled in my favor. Melissa was ordered to take down the post, issue a public apology, and pay damages for defamation. It wasn't enough to erase the pain she had caused, but it was enough to give me back some control over my life. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. Melissa's final stunt had backfired, and in the end, she was left with nothing. The restraining order, the defamation suit, the public humiliation. It all came crashing down on her, and she disappeared from my life for good. It took a long time for me to rebuild, to find some sense of normalcy after everything she had put me through. But eventually, I did. And while I'll never forget what she did, I've learned to let go of the anger, the bitterness. Melissa was a chapter of my life, a dark, twisted chapter, but now that chapter is closed, and I'm finally free.